This week on Engage the Sage.
Hi everyone, I'm Don Saucier. Welcome to this week's episode of Engage the Sage. This week, I'm going to talk to you about how to answer questions. In academia, we get asked a lot of questions. Whether we're teaching, whether we're giving a research presentation, whether we're interviewing, whether we're mentoring, we get a lot of questions. And this is exciting, but it can also be a little bit scary. The questions are often the most stressful part of teaching and presenting. And the reason I think it's the most stressful part is the only part you can't truly predict or control. Sometimes questions are good in that they actually ask us to provide information. Other times those questions are really a comment or a criticism disguised as a question. So questions can be scary. But I want to think about questions a little bit differently. I want to embrace questions. I want to encourage my audience to ask questions. I want to invite them to let me know what they want to know. Every question we get, whether it's in presenting our research, teaching in a classroom, every question we get is an opportunity to share with our audience more of what we know. It's an opportunity for us to show our audience how knowledgeable we are and maybe how thoughtful we are. I think there's some simple things that we can do to make the question answering experience better for us as the person answering the questions and better for the people who are asking those questions. And I'm going to share those recommendations with you now. My first recommendation for answering questions well is to follow a 4-step process. That process is to smile, breathe, think, and then talk. I have been asked a lot of questions in a lot of different domains in my career. And when I'm answering questions, I always have that experience of Excite Nerve. We have a video on Excite Nerve. We're going to link it at the end. But Excite Nerve is a situation where you're both excited and nervous at the same time. I know when I get questions in my teaching or my presenting of my research, I'm going to be excited and nervous at the same time. So I'm going to try to embrace that. And I'm going to try to control the feelings of anxiety that I have in that moment. So the 4-step process that I follow is the first thing that I do when I'm asked a question is I smile. Now, when I say that I smile, I'm not really smiling for my audience. I'm smiling for me. I'm smiling for me so that I calm down a little bit, and I see this now as a positive, not a negative interaction that I'm having with the person who asked the question. Smiling makes me happy. I will smile when I'm asked a question if it's over the phone. I will smile when I'm asked a question when I'm wearing a mask in class. The smiling is to help me calm down. The second thing that I do is I breathe. The breathing is also going to help me calm down, but it also gives me a little bit of a pause. It gives me a moment where I can do the third thing, which is think. Thinking is really important, and it's really important we do these steps in order, because if we think and then talk, it's going to be a lot better than if we talk and then we think. So I'm going to try to take a moment to pause to think before I start answering the question that I've been asked. After I've smiled, after I've breathed, after I've thought, now I start to talk. And one of the things that I find is after I've smiled, after I've breathed, and after I've thought, the talking part goes better. I usually say better things. I usually have a better answer for the question, and it's usually more measured, and I've managed my anxiety when I start to talk, so it sounds better too to me and to them. Now, I mentioned it's important to do these in order because I've been in the situation too where I sometimes forget, and I start to talk before I've thought. And the experience that happens to me is while I'm talking, I think of a better answer to the question. And I try not to do that. So now I try to do my thinking before my talking. The second recommendation that I have when we're answering questions is to thank your questioners and to validate the questions. When we're teaching and when we're presenting, it's sometimes because we're so focused on our own experience, sometimes easy to forget that the people who are asking a question, that might be a big deal for them. That might be an anxiety-producing experience for them as well. It's intimidating to speak in front of an audience. And the person who's asking a question is doing just that. They are asking a question in front of the rest of the audience, in front of their classmates, in front of you. And that might be something that is very intimidating to them. And I think validating them for using their voice in that space is really important. Asking a question is a risk. I know a lot of times when I've been sitting in an audience and I say, do I want to ask that? Has the person already answered that? Am I going to sound stupid asking that question? So I'm going to assume my audience might be having some of their reservations as well. So validating them by thanking them for their question, by telling them explicitly that it's a good question, is something that I really recommend. Now, when you thank your audience for asking a question, I think we have to mean it. I think we have to be authentic and genuine in doing so. What that will do is it'll let the questioner know that, hey, we're engaging in a communication here. And I really want to hear what you think, and I'll let you know what I think too. It also lets the rest of the audience know that asking questions is going to be okay. When someone asks a question and we have the opportunity to answer that question, we're actually creating a connection between us and our audience. And I think failing to make that connection is really a missed opportunity. So make sure you thank and validate your questioners. The third recommendation that I'm going to make when you're answering questions is to be aware of your body language. When I'm answering questions, one of the things that I try to do is I try to make eye contact with the person who's asked me the question in a validating way, not an intimidating, creepy way. But I try to make eye contact with the person who has asked the question, and I try to give them my shoulders. What I mean by that is I stand facing them. What I'm trying to convey by giving the audience my eyes and my shoulders is that I'm listening to you and I respect you for having asked that question. If, on the other hand, I turn away, I break eye contact, I maybe kind of cross my arms or do something like that, I might be conveying to the person asking the question that I'm uncomfortable or I'm not very happy that they asked that question. One of the things that I've kind of trained myself to do is when someone asks a question in one of my classes or I'm giving a research presentation, is I take a small step toward them to remind myself that I want to have this experience, that I want to have this exchange, even though it arouses that excite nerve. And as I said before, one of the things that I do to let that questioner know that I want to have this experience and let myself know that I'm ready for this experience is I do use my smile. And if you're comfortable smiling at your audience, I encourage you to do so too. The fourth recommendation that I'm going to make when answering questions is to find smart ways to say that you don't know. One of the reasons that question answering is so scary is we're afraid of looking like we don't know what we're talking about. We're afraid of not having the answer to the questions that people ask us. In reality, though, if they have good questions, we're probably not going to know the answer a lot. And it's okay to not know the answer. We often don't know the answer. We often don't know the information, or that information might not even exist. So I'm going to share with you a couple things that I do when I don't know the exact answer to a question. Sometimes when someone asks me a question, it is an answer that I could have. I am aware that that factual information does exist. And in that situation, I might let my audience know, hey, I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I will find it for you. Now, one of my pet peeves is when someone is teaching or presenting and they tell me they're going to find an answer and then they don't. So I highly recommend that if you tell your class or your audience that you will follow up with that answer, that you, in fact, find the answer and follow up in giving it to them. If you're teaching, this might be a regular part of your class. It might be kind of a situation where at the beginning of each class, you go over the answers to questions that you didn't know the answer of before. And this really shows your students and your audience that you care about finding the answers to their questions. I work with amazing teaching assistants, and one of their responsibilities is to go look up the answers to questions that I don't know the answer to. As you can imagine, this is something they do often. And it's really kind of a fun part of the class to have the teaching assistants engage with the class in that next class period and share all these amazing answers that they find to their questions. Interestingly, sometimes they don't find the exact answer, but they find some really interesting information from the psychological literature to share with our students. One of my favorite things, though, when a student asks me a question that I don't know the answer to, is I will brainstorm with them what the answer might be. I might crowdsource with them what that answer might be. Or, and I love this, I might talk them through the process we would need to engage in to find the answer to that question. One process I might talk them through is how to use the resources at our library to search for and retrieve the psychological literature that might contain the answer to their question. Another way, and this is my absolute favorite, another way is to talk them through the design of the research study that we would need to conduct to find the answer to their question. What we're doing with these strategies is we're actually empowering our students to think about how they would answer their own questions moving forward in their careers. I'll share with you an example of a question I was asked in general psychology once. And a student has asked, what will happen if, we're in the drugs and addiction part of the class, what would happen if I snorted a line of cocaine and I smoked a marijuana cigarette and I drank a case of Red Bull and I had a 6-pack of Natty Light and then I went and did gymnastics? And my answer was probably nothing good. My class laughed for a second And then what we did is we talked about I didn't have enough information to actually answer the question. I didn't know the potency of the drugs. I didn't know the dosages. I didn't know the tolerance. I didn't know the height and weight of the person. I didn't know if they had food in their stomach. What we did is we actually used this question that I have no idea what the answer would be to talk about the things that affect drug effects. So even sometimes when we don't know the answer to the question that we're asked, we can use it as an opportunity to teach them something about the concepts that we were discussing. The fifth recommendation that I have for making this question answering experience better for you and for your students is to love questions. Questions are awesome. They are not a waste of time. They actually create better opportunities for communication, for teaching, and for learning. If you are in a situation where you're teaching and you're presenting, and your audience asks you a question, what they are doing are using their voice in a potentially social anxiety-producing situation. They are showing you not only that they trust you, but they care about what you're saying. Someone asking you a question when you're teaching or presenting is showing that they are investing in you and your topic. A question being asked of you is a compliment being paid to you. When one person asks a question, it allows us to teach better. It allows us to fill in gaps that may have been confusing. It allows us to extend the information in ways that are personally relevant to our audience. Questions are absolutely amazing, and while they may be scary, I absolutely think we should look forward to this process. We should encourage the process. We should invite the process, and we should validate our students and our audience when they give us the wonderful opportunity to talk more about the content in ways that they want us to. So if your audience asks you questions, congratulations, you're doing something right. So there you have my recommendations for how to make the question answering experience for you better and for your audience better. So we can all manage our excite nerve and have wonderful experiences with our students talking about the stuff that we love. In the comments below, I would love to hear your recommendations for how to answer questions. I'd also love to hear some of the questions you've been asked that really kind of threw you, because I think that would be fun. So I look forward to reading your comments below. Thank you for joining this week on Engage the Sage. Please like, subscribe, sign up for notifications, share us on social media, and we'll see you next time on Engage the Sage.